Hello and welcome to Is It Fast? I'm Team Webber's Daily, and joining me today is endurance racing driver Samantha Tan. We caught up recently to chat about how the combination of a Ferrari driving experience and her father led her down the path of becoming a formidable racing driver, why an exam prevented her from celebrating her first podium at COTA, how she handles pressure on and off track, and a whole lot more. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Hi Samantha, thank you very much for being here today. First of all, how are you?
Hi, good. Thank you for having me. I'm doing pretty well. Just got back from F1 Vegas, so it's been an amazing weekend. But finally back at home for a couple days, and I'm heading to Europe this week already.
I'll say non-stop for you, as it's pretty much always is there. So take the 2 days of respite while you can, I think.
Yeah, hopefully get some rest in between then. Lots of us race car drivers like to joke we just go home to do laundry and repack the bag and then leave. So
I
essentially
believe
what's
that with you.
happening.
There's so much I feel like we could talk about with you, but I am going to go back to the start just for a minute there and ask the cliche question of what did first get you interested in the world of motorsport?
Yeah, so my dad is a huge car enthusiast, racing fan, never raced himself, but would like go to a lot of car meets with him, and he would take me to watch some of these like F1 races. So grew up around it. But didn't really fully get into like the automotive scene or into racing until he enrolled me in some performance driving schools when I was 13, 14 years old because he wanted me to be a safe driver on the roads, especially in Canada where our winters are treacherous.
Yes,
So
they are.
he wanted me to learn proper car control. And at the end of one of these programs, I got to go out in a real race car. It was a 458 challenge with a pro driver, and I went out for a hot lap, and I absolutely fell in love with it. Just like the speeds, the intense braking, acceleration. And as soon as I got out of the car, I was like, wow, I think I wanna be a race car driver too, Dad. So I
He was like,
started
oh no,
racing.
what have I started?
Exactly. I don't think that's what he intended for, but, so I started racing when I was just 16 years old, just after I got my driver's license, actually. Um, First race car was a 1991 Honda Civic.
Bit of a downgrade from the Ferrari.
But you all start somewhere, and I think it made a lot of sense to start in a very like low horsepower car, learn momentum, and actually
Show
had
what you
just
can
learned how to
drive, but
heel
then knock it
toe.
down to the
So
basics and like you got to do this
ex-
first time. Damn it.
exactly. I remember I couldn't even like reach the pedals at that time. They had to like move all these seats and put like already an insert, but
So I want to dive into that then a little bit because the 458 challenge was that were you in the hot seat and the pro driver was driving, or was the pro driver in the passenger seat?
No, he was driving. He was the one driving. I was
Okay.
in the passenger seat. First time in a like 5-point harness. And like I was so tiny and like my legs were flailing around still. So it was an incredible experience.
And so that was at the Circuit de Mont Tremblant, if I'm not
Hmm.
mistaken. The gorgeous circuit. Was that a bit of like had you been there before, or was it all just very surreal that you were there of all places, just being driven around in this Ferrari of all
So
things?
the event that was being hosted there was the Ferrari driving experience. I was actually the youngest participant ever. They had to make some exceptions for this little 14-year-old girl. But I think it was my first time driving there. Learned a lot. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, was that the same experience when you were driving Ferrari then? Because you got to drive in there as well. It wasn't just being taken around and learning a few bits. You got to have a go in yourself. Or was
Yeah.
that a separate event? Because I'm doing a bit of homework. I was looking, wasn't sure if it was two events or the same one.
No, this one, I think we got to try three different models. I think at the time it was probably like the 458, the California, might have been the FF or the F12 around that time. But it was super cool. Never thought a little 14-year-old girl would be able to be driving Ferraris on track.
No, I admit when I was reading that first one, I need to reread that. Let me double check. I
What
read
a
that quick.
great first
Okay, no, of
experience,
course. It's like,
right?
Well, exactly. I think karting, maybe some single seater like Formula Ford cars, and then I should just go straight for a Ferrari. I'm like, well, I should have maybe seen that
Agreed.
one coming with where she's gone since then, but at the same time, it's very, very left field.
Yeah, for sure. No karting experience at all, unfortunately, but that's how I got into it.
So with the Ferraris, there was really no turning back after that for you, was there? It was racing was going to be it, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, again, like I loved the feeling of it all. That's what it really came down to, like the adrenaline. And I was just so amazed at how precise he was, like on this hot lap, and like he like the car did exactly what like he told it to do, and essentially like I wanted to learn that skill. So it's very motivated to, be in the driver's seat.
You're saying your dad was a big part of the reason that you got into this in the first place. Do you think that you would have followed this motorsport path if he hadn't been so actively involved or not even involved at all?
Honestly, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think I probably would have gotten into cars at some point because they were always really like fascinating to me, and I always loved riding like passenger with my dad when because he had an E36 M3 that
Hmm.
I grew up kind of like driving around with him with, and I always loved that car. So I think I would get into automotive, but again, I feel like so much of what gets a lot of women into motorsport is like their dad or their brother is like into it, and they introduce it to
Hmm.
them at a very young age. And yeah, that's exactly what happened with me. I don't think I would have been exposed to that if it was not for him.
Have you ever thought about what you would have done if you hadn't been a racing driver, or if you not just stopped for long enough since then to even consider that?
I feel like, well, I did end up going to college for economics,
True.
and my parents were very big on education, and they made sure that, if I did decide to pursue racing, that I would also have to finish my college degree. So
Good to have a
probably
backup.
something in finance or something. Both my parents were econ majors as well, so following in their footsteps.
So I get the feeling with you if you had gone into finance world, I'm getting very Wolf of Wall Street vibes from you. With that kind of energy.
Ruthless businesswoman.
Exactly.
People might not know that's pretty late for a race car driver.
Yeah.
Like most kids start in karting, like he said, when they're 4 or 5 years
I
old,
dread to think
and
how quick
so
you'd be if you'd started sooner, to be honest. But
so yeah, it was a very steep learning curve. Like I had never raced before. I had no like wheel to wheel racing experience, was just like learning manual and how to like heel toe properly and learning racecraft in those like 3 short years essentially. Like I did 6 regional races in that Civic before I stepped up into my first national series, which was the Canadian Touring Car Championship.
hmm,
I can't remember how many races were in that season, but yeah, learning a lot of like how to deal with wheel to wheel things on top of like just having the pace, for example, because that's a big part of it. You can't race with other people if you're not already on the pace, right?
yeah.
Um, and it was like my first time like racing on slicks, for example. Rain tire. I think we had one rain race, but anyway, yeah, once I moved to Pirelli World Challenge, and in the US, the racing industry is much bigger than the one in Canada, it was automatically like much more competitive, um, and bigger fields. And I just remember being like very overwhelmed. It was 3 races per weekend. Um, but yeah, just like learning all of these different things. And I had started in these front wheel drive cars, from essentially never driving front wheel drive because I'd only been learning on a BMW platform, on the street
You'd like to throw
or in a
yourself in the
street
deep
car.
end there, don't you? Jumping from one
Right?
thing to the other completely, aren't you?
And then, yeah, so the first like what 3, 4 years of my career, I was jumping into different manufacturer like different race cars per season. So it was like the Mini, and then it was the Kia for a year, and then it was a Civic for another year, like a 2016 Civic, Civic Si. If I remember correctly. And so it was like trying all these different platforms, which I don't think was very beneficial to my career at the time, because I think it's much better to learn one platform fully and like really understand it before, making that next step into a different
Mhm.
car. Um, So it was a lot of learning. But obviously like keeping my mind open. I had an incredible coach at the time, and I think that was the reason why I was able to, learn so much and really maximize all the experiences I was having at the time. And then finally, as you know, in 2017, like starting my own team,
Hmm.
getting
Pretty
my
boss
first
move.
two, thank you, my first two BMW race cars. It was the M235, and once again, jumping into a completely different platform, rear
Well,
wheel
at that point,
drive
that's the
this
only
time.
constant. Just keep jumping around the place. That's the only thing that's
Yeah.
staying consistent with all of it.
So I think that year was really about learning again, like how to go from a front wheel drive race car to a rear wheel drive race car, which, if you're in the front wheel drive, you're oversteering, you're basically what you have to do is keep your foot in it. You don't want to do that in a rear wheel drive car.
Mm.
Because you basically
All
ride it
part of
out
the
in front wheel
learning
drive.
curve.
Yeah, so just like changing those little like different differences, right? I'd say now, if you know, like from 2018 onward, I was in the GT4 for 3 years, which I think was very formative for like my skills, because essentially I was able to stay on the same platform and like truly like learn the car inside and out. Um,
So I think I've seen several times you saying that you felt quite at home there and it's where you wanted to be. And I think maybe is that because you just stayed there for more than 5 minutes, or
exactly right. But I think it very much suited like my driving style. And just getting, yeah, again, getting very comfortable with the car, learning like there was much more, I think there was more technology involved in the GT4 than the M235. Obviously, I think the M235 was more of like a modified street car than like a fully built race car. I think the GT4 was finally like a very like real it was a real race car. We had different traction control mapping and like ABS mapping, and being able to adjust like brake bias and all that stuff. But anyway,
do you like that
I would
element of it,
say
being able to dial down on the details a lot more when you've got the tools available, or do you prefer kind of less and just do it more on feel?
I think I like being able to change everything based on the situation. Because yeah, you're like if the technology is there, like why not use it, right?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think it's been really cool for me to learn jumping into the GT3, for example. Like we have 15 different traction control settings and like ABS fuel mapping, like all of these things. It's been really cool to see how the car changes once I start messing around with all these little like settings. So I personally like it, because again, like track condition, like your tire condition, that all changes over the course of the race. And I want to be able to, manipulate these different things to be able to maximize what I have at the time.
And the
So,
engineers like you a bit more as well, then, because they can actually have a conversation with you.
exactly, exactly. But I would say, just to answer like your original question, I think nowadays, I mean, if there's still that learning curve. Like this is my second year in GT3. I've had the opportunity to race both World Challenge America and World Challenge Europe this year, and Europe was like the biggest GT3 fields I've ever seen, and against some of like like the best sports car racers out there, the biggest teams on some of the best tracks in the world. Like it still gets like overwhelming sometimes, but I think I now have like the toolkit to be able to approach these challenges like effectively.
Is that something off track as well that you've noticed as well in terms of you're so busy doing there appears to be a million different things at once. Does it allow you to focus more when you get in the car then because that is where you're at home and it's the setting whilst it's you're going over Europe, you're in America, you're here, you're there, but it's always you're in the seat, you're in the car, you're on a track, you know this. Does all of that other stuff just kind of melt away and that lets you focus more, or does it make that process a bit harder for you because there's so much else going on?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, I have an incredible team behind me, so I feel like that's a
Got to get
big
the shout
reason of
outs.
why. Exactly. So that's a big reason why, like, once I get in the car, I can just focus on the driving because I know that I can rely on my team members to take care of everything else,
Mhm.
literally. Yeah, like once the helmet's on, everything else kind of fades away, and I think what makes a good race car driver is that compartmentalization aspect is like being able to, set aside like everything else in your life and really just focus on the task at hand.
With the racing, then I'm intrigued. I was watching the Michael Fassbender documentary. I don't know if you saw it yet. Probably not because it came out last Friday in Vegas, doing a million things there, but worth a
Ah,
watch. And he was saying that once I think he's a driver that puts a lot of pressure on himself to get everything right. But then when you sometimes if you focus too much on that stuff, it overcomplicates it. Do you find you thrive better under pressure for those things, or are you kind of just take it as it goes and try not to overthink it too much and
I
just
mean, I feel
find a
like
natural rhythm?
Yeah, I feel like I can definitely relate to him. There's a lot of times where I do have imposter syndrome, like feeling like, do I really deserve to be here? Like, am I doing enough? Like all of those kinds of like self-doubt. So I can definitely resonate with that. Thankfully, like I have to say, like therapy has been very, very beneficial for me in like regulating these emotions. And I think it's that mental aspect of racing is so much more important than people really like think it is, because you have to be able to like understand when you are giving yourself these like mental barriers, because you are your
Mm.
biggest mental barrier, you are your biggest like enemy essentially. So thankfully, I feel like I have been pretty good under pressure. I've been able to figure out a way to kind of like turn it into motivation, because I just like,
Mm.
one, I want to prove to myself that like I can do it, but if I like am also getting like hate on the internet or whatever, I want to prove to everybody else that yeah, I am that girl. Like I can do it.
If you're going to be annoyed at me, I'm going to make you really annoyed because I'm going to do even better this time.
Exactly. Exactly. Like nothing feels better than proving people wrong, you
Yeah,
know?
no, I can agree with that one. Doing my research on you, I found an interview where you said you'd had the chance to drive an F1 car once, but there wasn't much details on that, so I feel like I have to ask. So, did that happen? And if so, no, didn't happen.
No,
Okay,
that
someone's making
never
stuff up.
happened.
Interesting.
I've been able to drive a Formula 1600 car. I don't know if that was
Maybe
like
they
a
left off a couple of
typo. They put
numbers.
the numbers.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was like much, much smaller.
Once again, I thought
Um,
surely if you find this out, you've got to ask the person, and there was just nothing else. I'm like, this seems curious. I've got to follow up on this.
I would have loved
1600.
to. That would be an incredible experience. But yeah, my first experience with a Formula car was this Formula 1600 test. It was 2017, and I was there also with my BMW, which was really funny. I'll have comparison later, but
Hmm.
just how much later I could brake in this car was just absolutely mental to me. Like you think you could break here and you're like, no, you can break way, 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 way later. Keep going. Um, and I absolutely loved it. And obviously, like you're sitting in the middle of the car, like the wheels are like right here next to you. It was like just a completely different experience from what I was used to. I had an absolute blast. The reason
So
why
I
I
love
didn't
how
end
much
up
of that
going,
impression it's left on you there. It's just ruined once, and it's still that grin on your
I know
face.
it's still like, every time I'm in a race car, it's like that.
Fair, fair.
But the reason why I didn't go the formula route because like one, like starting and racing like so late, knowing I would have an even steeper learning curve trying to get to
Hmm.
the same pace as some of these other formula drivers. Um, a bit more expensive going the formula route for sure. And also, I mean, Rubbing's racing, and I like that aspect of closed cockpit racing. But I remember getting back in my BMW like right after that test and being like, wow, this thing is a boat.
It's
But
hard
it
to look back at it the
honestly
same way after that.
it almost made everything feel slower. So I think like jumping in the formula car was actually very good training, because yeah, like everything was much slower once I had hopped back into the 235.
Did it weirdly make you calmer then when you got back in the normal cars that you're driving? Because you're like, okay, I've got much more time to do everything now. I can be making tea over
Exactly.
here whilst I'm getting ready to brake and all this kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So then 2019, particularly, there was a story that I have to ask about. You got a podium at the 24 hours in Kota, but then you had to miss the actual podium because who is this professor and why were they so mean? Because they made you come back for an exam. What the hell?
I think this just like illustrates what my entire college experience was. Like so many times. As you know, like race weekends are like they start like Wednesday or Thursday sometimes. So I so many times like having to take quizzes early or try to like get my friends to write all my notes for me for my classes that I was missing. Sometimes like going testing on weekends and having to study or write essays in between sessions. um, but to answer your question about the 24-hour coda, I think that was my very first endurance race, if I remember correctly. Um, it was a lot of fun.
That's even
But
meaner in a
besides
way
that,
then, if that's your first one, because it's like you've done so well straight off the box, like you can't even celebrate it properly because you
I
got in a bloody
know.
exam.
I know. I remember it was midterms that week, and I had already written I think two or three exams in preparation for the 24-hour quota. But I had asked this professor, I was like, "Hey, like I'm doing a literal 24-hour race this weekend. Is there any way that I could take the exam like early or like on Monday or Tuesday?" And she just wouldn't
Trust me, she's
budge.
not going to have
She
time
just
to cheat if she wanted to, because literally she's going to be in the car
exactly.
racing around. She's not going to have
She
it on
was
the
like,
dashboard trying to read all this stuff.
she's like, it's not fair to your peers, blah, 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 blah. So come Sunday,
This is
I
in a Christmas
literally
card.
had to, I think I had to fly out before the race had even finished. And I vividly remember like buying Wi-Fi on the plane so I could watch the live timing because I was like, where are we? Like, I need to know where my car
Oh,
is. Um, we finished third and I couldn't make
I
the
imagine that
podium
was a
because
mix
I
of
was on a
emotions, though,
flight.
was it?
Yeah, like one, like so happy, like podium my very first endurance race, but also like the fact that I could not physically be there to get on the podium with my teammates, like broke my heart.
Oh, oh. Least
But I
favorite
did well on the exam.
professor. I mean, I'm glad. I think again, like you say, it's go back to earlier. You prove them wrong that way. It's like, yeah, I can still do brilliantly in the essays and exam before and afterwards. Doesn't matter if you're going to be like this or not.
Yeah.
That's. I don't think I've ever had that with a driver though. That's just because normally people are just nicer, just like, yeah, you're in a race, go for it. It's one day, makes no difference. If you'd been sick, there'd have been nothing you could do about it. You'd have had to take it another day. Uh, I won't focus on it. I won't focus on it.
You're good. I mean, some professors are much nicer and more lenient than others, but yeah, that pretty much
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
summarizes my college experience.
As I was saying at the top, there's a lot I feel like we could talk about when it comes to you, but I want to focus on this year for a second. How would you describe 2023? Has there been best moment for you and a most challenging moment?
Oh man, yes. This has been a very
Was of
busy
excite.
season, but I think it was like very formative for me. I got to drive the BMW, the M4 GT3 here in the US for World Challenge America, but I also got to drive the Ferrari 296 GT3 over in Europe for the GT World Challenge Europe Endurance Cup. So it was a lot of jumping back and forth between platforms. I had never driven a Ferrari race car. Oh, I know I had driven a Ferrari Challenge, sorry, but a GT3 Ferrari race car. So I had to learn a whole new car yet again.
Be used to that
After
at this
being,
point.
yeah, I'm like so used to driving a front engine BMW. Like I've been racing BMWs for 6 years now, so very comfortable in the car. And to go to a mid-engine Ferrari was just like very different. And having to learn like the all the different like launch processes, the new technology in the Ferrari, which by the way, we couldn't even get the 296 at the beginning of the season, so we actually started the season with the 488 GT3 and swapped to the 296 at
Well, it
Spa.
clearly wasn't
But
challenging enough for you as it was, so yeah.
so it was again in Europe we don't have you're actually not allowed to test. So we had I think one official test before the start of the season, and that was essentially all I got for practice time until like the actual race weekend. And we got two practice sessions per weekend, so all in all, just very minimal track time. But I'd like to say I think I faced the challenge well. I think I learned pretty quickly. There was still a lot of things I think even at the end of the season I still wanted to learn. I know we were talking briefly earlier about like the ability to change like all of these settings. But I think on the BMW, I have a much better grasp of it. And the Ferrari, like it was all completely new to me. So for the majority of the season, I would, get in after my co-driver and I would just leave it on the settings that he had because I didn't
Hmm.
really
There
fully
wasn't time to
grasp.
play with everything properly.
Exactly, play around with everything, really like fully understand like, oh, if I change this setting, like how does the car feel? So I feel like I just left it. I left it, and that's exactly I think what I wanted to learn more about in the Ferrari. But I will say it was a lot of fun. There's like so much downforce in that car. Almost drives like a prototype, for example. But and then in the BMW for the season, I think we did incredible. I know I'm like summarizing the whole season here, but um
Ah, oh, good.
actually I'll finish with the SRO Europe week season. We very most challenging for me was again learning the car, but at Monza, first race of the season, I got taken out before the first corner. I don't know if you saw that. Um,
I mean, I didn't
this
want to bring it up.
competitor, this competitor didn't see me and just went all the way left. Like I am at the furthest left part of the
I was going to say
track
it's one thing
because
getting taken out into the first corner. That one's more understandable because, you see stuff happen there all the time, but you can't even get there.
I know. And I had great pace that weekend. Like I had learned, it was my first time at Monza. I'd learned the track really quickly. We were looking forward to, having a good finish. And I remember like before the start of the race, my team manager was like, okay, Monza turn one. There were 50 plus GT3 cars. Something's gonna happen. He's like, don't even go for the corner.
I mean,
Take the
he was
exit.
right.
Like take the shortcut on the left side. So don't even try to make the corner because it's just gonna be an absolute mess. Unfortunately, I was the car
I was going to say,
that
in
got
theory,
crashed
he wasn't
into.
wrong.
So here I am, like fully on the left side of the track, and still this competitor had come like swept all the way over and just took both of us out before the first corner. Car was like completely totaled. At least the front was. Thankfully the engine was fine. But I remember just being like absolutely devastated. Like I got out of the car, I was like on my knees, I was like crying, like bawling my eyes out. But I can
I would not have
remember the
wanted to be the other person
crowd.
into the car. I'm just going to
I
walk backwards away slowly from her before she sees me.
know. Yeah, heartbroken. But I remember the fans in the stands were like, they were literally like cheering me on to like get up and like,
Hmm.
oh. So it was like a very heartwarming moment, but also like, wow, that was the worst thing that could have happened. So I would say that was the most challenging thing for me this year in the SRO Europe side of things. I think the best
So we've got
thing
to
was
have a bit of levity there.
yeah, our highlight of the season was definitely our Barcelona win,
Hmm.
which was the final race of the season. I think we had two podiums, so I think we came second at Paul Ricard and third at Nürburgring. So coming into the final race, we actually were in contention for vice champion. Um, and we gave it all we got. We won. We won Barcelona. Unfortunately, the Lamborghini that was competing with us for vice champion finished, I think, third. So they beat us by literally, I think, like a point or two in the championship standings. So we finished the season third in the championship and winning Barcelona. And so that was just a great way
Save
to,
the best
to
for
end the
last.
season because, like clearly like I had learned enough to be able to put it to work and bring the car home first. So that was the summary of my SRO Europe campaign. And
So
to
when you
go
look at where the
to
start and to the end, then it works out quite nicely in the
it
end.
was a roller coaster of
Yeah,
emotions
yeah.
this season. um And then, yeah, in GT World Challenge America, we essentially had changed all of the team members on my team this year. First time working with a factory driver and a factory engineer. So I was like a sponge. I was trying to soak in as much knowledge as possible from these guys who clearly know like the car inside and out. Like they're very, very experienced. The start of the season, I think because we had changed all of the team members, like it took a few races for us to find our rhythm. But I remember this is the most challenging, probably. Actually, no, there were a few heartbreaks this season, but at NOLA, I was second overall coming into the final few corners, and my car shut down because the oil pump belt ripped. Literally, like with five corners to go, and I was fighting for my life with first place. Like we were going at it. It was
Heartbreaking.
an incredible battle, and yeah, finished the race on the side of the track in like turn 5. It was just like, wow, wow. um,
We'll
but
focus on the Barcelona win, I think.
But we were like, I think for the first few weekends of the season, like we were just on the cusp of a podium. Like something had always gone wrong, either like in the pit lane or we got taken out or something, like parts obviously like in Nola. And then something turned when we got to the halfway point of the season. I actually changed teammates from John Edwards to Neil Verhagen. Um, and we double podiumed at VIR, and then I believe it was Road America after that, and I won my very first GT3 race there. So that was definitely a high. And then I think it was
So it sounds like you
Sebring.
have a rough start to it, but then it does come good
Yeah,
in the end, you know?
yeah. So
Like
we
you say,
actually, I
roller
think
coaster.
yeah, for sure. Like for sure. We had 3 consecutive P2s. So we knew that the first place was coming, and it finally happened at Road America. Very emotional moment for me. And then we headed to Sebring, and I think this is the most challenging race for us because we got disqualified in qualifying. Um, so that meant we had to start at the back of both races. But race 1, like we had essentially like we were on a mission. We were on a mission and we made our way up to P2. So from dead last on the
I
grid.
was going to say, yeah.
And then we were basically okay, like rinse and repeat. We're gonna do that again in race 2, and we went from dead last to first overall. Like
So I'm just
we
thinking
were
about the lead you would
flying.
have had if you had started near the top. Christ, you'd
Exactly. Like
been like 2 miles
we
down the
were
road.
flying. We were flying. It was just, yeah, it was a lot of emotions, and unfortunately we also ended up getting disqualified from race 2. Um yeah, that was definitely the
That
most
was tough.
challenging weekend for us because essentially that also took us out of the championship fight. And it was definitely not our fault. I'm not going to get into it. It was not our fault. It
Save
was
that for
like
another time.
a little technicality that I still to this day think that they should have ruled in our favor because we had everything right, but that's
We don't need
that.
to go there.
I'll just give like a quick conclusion to that. I mean,
Go for it.
overall, I think I don't think I've ever learned so much in one season. To finish the season with two 2 wins, and should have been 3 wins, but and multiple podiums. Like we had so many fast laps, like hard charger awards, which is essentially for most positions gained over the
Mhm.
course of a race. I mean, I can be very proud of everything we've achieved this year. And like huge thank you to my team for putting up with me and everything that we were like the pit stop freaking practice that we did every race, even though we were all dead tired and wanting to go home. Like it was all those late nights that contributed to these successes. So overall, it was again a roller coaster of emotions for the season, but again, I can be very proud.
Yes, yes, you definitely can. And it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I want to thank you very much for taking the time out. And best of luck for 2024. I think if you've got half the speed you did this year, then everyone else should be quite afraid.
Oh yeah, we're going for that championship win.
Thank you again to Samantha for taking the time to chat, and best of luck for everything in 2024. Details of where you can find Samantha and I on social media will be in the description to this episode, as well as a link to the accompanying article for this podcast over on Is It Fast. Thank you for listening. We'll see you again soon.